Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Snowden. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And today we are changing it up a little bit. Normally, I do monthly videos on relationship dynamics and kind of toxic relationship dynamics, how to get through difficult moments, uncovering addictions, etc. But today, in light of everything that is going on with the coronavirus, quarantine experience, the high level of stress and tension that we're all experiencing over a long, unknown period of time, I thought it was a really great idea to bring on a special guest. Her name is Michelle Gross. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, and she works with me. We've worked together for a couple years now. She is an eating disorder specialist. She has worked for 25 years in the world of disordered eating. So ranging from overeating, stress eating, bulimia, anorexia nervosa, and she'll talk a little bit more about that. But I am finding that when we are in states of stress, not only is substance abuse becoming a bigger issue and porn addiction and other things like that, but stress eating, overeating, and also just seeing loved ones and family members struggling with disordered eating is also becoming ever more prevalent. So I brought on an expert so she can kind of tell you about what she's seeing and help give you a language to better understand what might be happening to you or to a loved one, and give you a little bit of resources to kind of figure out more information, find more help when you need it. So Michelle Gross, thank you for joining me. Please introduce yourself and tell your background and what you're seeing.
Hi, Kristen. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. I so am appreciative of your willingness to let me join you. And I have specialized in eating disorders for the last 25 years or so. This is my passion. This is the primary thing that I do in my private practice, although I work with all different kinds of issues. Eating disorders have always been at the forefront of what I do in my work. And one of the things that I'm seeing recently with the COVID, unfortunately, is that so many my clients are really struggling in different ways with their eating disorders. A lot of my clients are students, college students perhaps, who've had to return to their homes outside of their colleges and be back with their family of origin. So we're seeing the dynamics that are coming up in their households around eating and food, with people being stressed during these times and all under the roof together for perhaps it's been a long time since they've all lived with one another or a while. And so that's challenging for everyone, but especially for the eating disordered client. For some of my older clients who are maybe parents with small children at home, they're taking on several different roles. So they're parenting, maybe they're working, and then they're also having to deal with their own eating disorder as they are juggling many different balls to kind of keep things running in their household. So all these things are impacting my clients. And eating disorders at the end of the day are really a coping mechanism for dealing with stress, anxiety, depression. So during times of stress, we see the intensity of the eating disorders going up. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about a little bit today.
And can you start, thank you for that. Can you start with a kind of eating disorder 101 for viewers? Because again, people on my channel most often have addiction backgrounds or betrayal trauma and stuff like that. So they may not really understand the various categories of what eating disorders look like, the symptoms, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So the major eating disorders that I deal with in my private practice are anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorders. There are more eating disorders than that. I won't go into all of them today, although I'll touch on them a little bit. But with the anorexic, what you see is an individual who has a very low body weight. And despite their body weight being low or underweight, there's this persistent restriction of energy and an inability to eat to sustain their weight. So that's the first criteria that we normally see with the anorexic. The second that we see is a weight phobia. So there is an intense emotional fear of gaining weight or becoming what they would call fat. And that fear interferes with any weight gain, necessary weight gain actually happening. And then the last thing that we'll see with the anorexic is body image issues. So there's a real disconnect between how the individual perceives himself and how their body actually is. So the person will look in the mirror and they will see someone who's overweight, and they'll be looking at various nuances in their body and really disturbed by them. Anybody else would see them as underweight. So that's the anorexic. And there's two different kinds of anorexics. Oh, there's a restricting type who primarily does not take in enough calories. And then there's the anorexic who once in a while will have a binge purge episode, and they will overeat and then get rid of the calories that they've consumed. So that's the anorexic. The bulimic is different than the anorexic. Their pattern, instead of restriction, is that they have a tendency to binge, and they need to binge at least once per week. And a binge is eating a large amount of calories in a discrete amount of time. So they could eat in a single sitting what one might have in an entire day, literally until they're full to the brim. And then followed by this excessive intake of food will be guilt, remorse, upset about what they've taken in. So what we'll see is a purge. The purge usually takes the form of vomiting, but not all clients actually vomit. Some clients will use laxatives and avoid feeling full by putting their body into a state of needing excessive use of the restroom. Others will use diuretics and feel like as they get all the water out of their system, they feel thinner. And then there's even what we call exercise bulimics, who will go and just spend hours at the gym or running to get rid of the calories that way. We've even had people misuse insulin or not take it properly in diabetics, and that will put their body into a state where it's eating muscle and necessary organs to sustain itself. So the bulimic has a binge purge cycle is what we see with them. And they need to do this at least once a week for 3 consecutive months for them to be considered full-blown bulimic. And then the binge eater is similar to the bulimic, and they will have these binge episodes. The difference is that they don't purge. So they will have recurrent episodes where they will have large amounts of food in a discrete period of time. They'll oftentimes do this while they're alone. They'll be very embarrassed by it. They'll feel disgusted with themselves or guilty. They'll feel distressed actually as they're doing the binge. And then afterwards, they will just feel terrible about themselves, but they don't get rid of the calories. So those are the 3 main eating disorders that I see. But then there's all different kinds of eating disorders that also exist, some that haven't even made our diagnosis book, such as preoccupation with health foods, and there's a new up-and-coming trend that we call bigorexia loosely, which is for oftentimes bodybuilders, a preoccupation with gaining muscle and being larger muscular-wise. And even those clients seem to be struggling right now because they can't go to the gym, they can't do their regular weight routines. So there's this fear of losing muscle mass. So it's affecting individuals with eating disorders right now across the board, but those are some of the eating disorders that I'm noticing right now struggles happening.
And those seem to be, you know, similar, like I often will talk about the spectrum, right? So there's people who are full-blown sex addicts, or, you know, chronic infidelity or chronic acting out behavior, chronic substance abuse users. But then there's also people that during these seasons of really high stress and difficulty turn to these coping skills to kind of get through these moments. So, I mean, right now, Google's showing that porn use is shooting up to exponential levels, even higher than it normally is. That liquor sales are through the roof. To say that maybe this isn't going to be an issue constantly, but there is immediate concern about the way that we're turning to these not very healthy, not very congruent, not very safe ways of managing this high level of stress. And one of the reasons why I thought about talking to you is I see these pictures in the grocery stores of entire fridge sections of ice cream empty, entire bread and pasta empty. I mean, all these comfort food. I mean, ironically, we walk into grocery stores, we don't tend to have a produce issue. There seems to be plenty there, but it seems to be the comfort foods that are disappearing off the roof, or disappearing off the shelves, I'm sorry, that are making me realize, oh wow, we are desperately grabbing at things to feel okay right now. And I was hoping you could kind of say more about that, about what you're seeing just in the general population, maybe not even those extreme who were already diagnosed and in a state of struggle.
Absolutely. Well, if you look at, like you were talking about, when we go to the market right now, there's slim pickings. So some of us are forced to just grab whatever's there. I know myself included. You know, I want a certain kind of milk, and my milk was out, and never ever have I had lactose-free milk before, but that was the only container, so that's what I purchased. You know, so people are getting whatever they could get. I think that there's been this kind of ration mentality recently, like, oh my goodness, are we going to be able to go outside? We want to go to the market as infrequently as possible. So people have been stocking up. And if you look at the binge eater, them having a bunch of, you know, foods that are boxed and canned, and like you said, ice cream and cookies and things like that in their house, that's a setup for disaster. For someone who, even it doesn't have a full-blown eating disorder, but tends to graze and has maybe an unhealthy relationship with food, to have all those foods sitting around in their pantry and in their fridge, some that aren't their normal foods, is really, really difficult. If you look at a person who's trying to diet or to restrict intake, anorexic or not, to not have their preference and their choices that they feel the most comfortable with could make them want to avoid food altogether even more. So we see them struggling with, oh my goodness, I don't want to touch that. That's not what I normally eat. And for my anorexics in particular, they have a lot of food rules. So to eat outside their comfort zones, that's just absolutely unacceptable to them. That is just not tolerable. So we see the struggle with that. And then you put a family together where maybe mom's cooking the only dinner she can come up with, and you've got someone who's maybe on a diet or wanting to be on a diet, and she made everything from, you know, a box, frozen dinners. And my clients are, I don't do that. So we're seeing all these dynamics really impacting people. I hear people saying, I'm raiding the fridge because what else is there to do all day?
Right.
And then I hear people saying, I'm not eating because I'm sitting on my rear end way too much and I'm not burning any calories, and it feels like we're just waiting for the next meal. And they're terrified that their weight is just going to go through the roof. So it's a tough time, really, really tough time for everyone.
Yeah. Can you give me, or I guess the audience too, some cues to understand, and maybe some how-tos or some thinking, I don't know, some resourcing about how to manage the boredom eating, the run-of-the-mill binge eating, the run-of-the-mill kind of perseverating, ruminating of, oh my God, I've been sitting on my butt all day. I'm going to be so out of I mean, even my husband and I have a pretty mean streak of vanity between us. And we just joke about how out of shape we're going to be. We joke about how our increase in dessert consumption. We have a concern about our kids being sedentary for long periods of time. Let's not even talk about the social skills that they're completely missing out on. Can you speak to those people?
Absolutely. I think right now more than ever, we need to create a structure for ourselves, some kind of a routine. It might not be identical to our routine when we're not dealing with COVID, but I think that it's critical that we have a time that we choose to wake in the morning, even if it's an hour or two later that we wake. And then we do our morning routine, whatever it would normally be, whether it's showering first, then having breakfast, then sitting down and making that work time, whether it be schoolwork or actual work, just so the day feels somewhat familiar and typical for us. The time that we start, like I said, might be different. But even times to get fresh air. So if we're homeschooling, for instance, then maybe we create a time that is PE time for our kids, and that might happen in our own backyard. But we go outside, we try to move around, maybe we do calisthenics. If we don't have the luxury of a backyard, maybe we do that in our own living room. But that becomes our exercise time. If we're normally a gym rat, then we have our time that we would normally go to the gym in our home, in our yard, walking around their neighborhood, keeping our social distance, if you will. But to have those structures in place, and then even time for entertainment. The beauty of like what we're doing right now, we're using a platform that has become not just a platform for sharing information to the world, but this is our new socializing platform.
Right.
So, Friday night, my husband and I had a dinner party, and I encourage everyone to do that. And we were with 6 other couples on Zoom, and it was fabulous. We were all in our kitchens cooking together, talking, and we spent 2 hours, and the night went quickly. So everyone can benefit from having social time and having home time and breaking it up a little bit, and then maybe doing things differently as a family, having time to just play a board game together, to reconnect as a family. I see so many families, everybody going to their own rooms, and yes, we need our space, but we can only spend so much time in our own room before we start to feel totally overwhelmed. And that's where people start visiting that fridge. If they're an overeater, that becomes a problem if that's the only entertainment going on in the household. And then trying new things, learning crafts and stuff. I've seen all these advertisements recently for art classes online, where maybe you would normally go to a studio with a bunch of friends and learn how to do a drawing, like a guided drawing or a guided painting. Those things are out there right now. I love it. I've seen knitting classes, painting classes, and I'm encouraging a lot of my clients to take advantage of those. We can't do them every day, but I've noticed that the price for these classes has gone down significantly. I think to accommodate people who are struggling right now and need to socialize. So get together 6 of your friends and go have a painting class in your living room with them in their living rooms.
What I find amazing is whether or not you're talking about eating disorders or addiction or kind of weathering the storm of a difficult relationship. Most commonly, therapists are always saying, go out, make connections, use the connectivity of another human relationship to kind of weather all those storms. And the difficult part is, because first and foremost, trauma is disconnection. So experiencing trauma is disconnecting from your mind and your body, disconnecting from other people. That's just a side symptom of experiencing trauma, and we're all in trauma. All of us are. And so it just sounds like anytime we're going to these unhealthy coping skills of the overeating or making sure we run our 6 miles per day no matter what, or ruminating if we didn't do it and getting down on ourselves if we've eaten too many of those snacks, etc. The importance is that basically that's a symptom telling you that you need to start taking care of yourself. You need to manage the stress level in a better way. And like you said, you incorporated food to have your dinner party, but you did it in a healthy way while connecting with people versus doing it in an isolative, hateful, shaming way. That sounds like that's the big difference between the two, right? A disordered way of connecting with food versus a healthy way.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I didn't say is that it is absolutely critical to continue to have 3 meals a day. And like I said, I don't care if breakfast gets pushed from 7 a.m. until 9, but what I see is when we start missing meals, that's a setup for, if you're a binger, binging later. If you're an overeater, grazing. We need some of my dietitian friends will call it front loaded. We need to start our day in a healthy manner, have that breakfast, and 3-4 hours later, have that lunch, and 3-4 hours later, have that dinner. And then we can pick and choose based on our hunger how much of a snack we want. But the biggest mistake we can make as far as continuing to have a healthy relationship with food and not overdoing it or underdoing it is to miss a meal. To me, that's just off the table for my clients. We don't want to ever miss a meal during this time, but we need to feel like something's going on in between those meals,
Right.
so that it doesn't feel like the only thing that we have all day is the meal.
That's really well said. I like that. And it's something too I thought that we could talk about. You touched upon it, was the bulimic behavior. We go to a park with social distancing almost every day with my kids so they can ride a bike. Every day we've been there, I've seen a very, very skinny teenage girl running or working out every single day. She is there before we get there. She's still there when we leave. And I thought about the story that you're talking about, is that people are using this kind of dead time, slow time, quiet time to go, oh, great, I can work out for 10 of those hours. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, that is one of the things that is so concerning, is that the person who normally is preoccupied with weight loss, now they can make it their full-time job because nothing else is going on, you know? So, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing individuals say, I'm not going to sit on my couch all day long. There's no way I can possibly do that. And to be around food, some of my clients are terrified to just go to a market, little more sit in a house with food all day long. And then the food that they don't eat all day long, that's just salt in a wound. So we are seeing people exercising for hours upon hours to offset what they think is this just given weight gain that's going to occur. So it's a real problem. And I'm telling my clients, you know, you can pick your hour, that's your exercise hour, but it should be limited. It should be no more than an hour. And go out, get your fresh air, do it, or do it in your house if you're more inclined, but have a beginning, a middle, and end even of your workout, so that that doesn't take on a life of its own. And we are seeing that that's happening for a lot of my clients, for sure. A lot of them are exercising way too much.
So tell me, Michelle, I'm sitting in a family system, we're quarantined. I find myself ruminating, should I eat that Oreo? Should I not? Or I just ate that whole bag of Oreos. Or I'm spending 3-4 hours a day working out or anticipating what I'm going to do for my workout. And in between, I'm binging on news stories of how many people are dying and the threats that are going on. I'm in an insanity cycle. Coach me out of this. And again, this is not therapy, so this is not to replace therapy at all, but please give me some resources for these people who are stuck, that are, you know, having the disordered eating, the high stress levels, the unhealthy coping skills.
Kristen, I love that you said that you were binging on the news, because anything in excess is too much, right? So,
right. Well
you know, the
said.
first thing I would say, Kristen, is get off the TV here. It's like, enough of that. And I'm telling my clients the same. I think the key here is to follow everything in moderation. So if we want to watch TV, we want to watch the news, fine, but not all night long. Let's watch it for an hour and then enough of that. Turn on to something more happy, right? When it comes to the food and having something yummy, I'm a proponent of all foods fit. Everything in moderation is just fine. If you want your 2 cookies, Kristen, have your 2 cookies, but don't make them your lunch. Don't replace a meal with them. Have them as part of a meal or part of a snack, and in a portion size. That way we're able to enjoy it and have it. It's not put up on a pedestal where we long for it and then feel deprived. My favorite phrase on earth is deprivation breeds entitlement to indulge. If we put anything on a pedestal and we say it's forbidden, we want it all the more. So when it comes to food, I believe that if we can just practice having all foods fits as our rule, and then turning to those things when it's time to turn to them and checking in with ourselves. I have a great handout called The 8 Traits of Emotional Hunger, and it really kind of explains the difference between emotional hunger and physical hunger. And that's a great tool to utilize. And I'll explain that a little bit in a couple of minutes, but to kind of check in with ourselves. Are we eating because we haven't eaten? It's time for lunch, it's time for dinner. Or are we eating because there's nothing better to do? Or we're feeling out of control, or we're feeling sad, or we're feeling anxious, and we're stuffing our feelings using the food as kind of the cork to cover up the discomfort. That's the kinds of questions that we need to be asking ourselves right now. Is, why am I eating? Is it time? Is it entertainment? Am I nervous? Am I freaking out? You know, if that's the case, what would help me to really feel more in control that actually does something for me? Because the food's not the fix, or the lack of food's not the fix. Sure.
Okay. Okay. So the form for everyone listening about the emotional eating that you just went over, we'll have a link in the comments page below that you'll be able to click on to get to. And speaking of online resources, groups, accountability systems, I mean, any suggestions about that? I mean, there's so many great 12-step groups that I send clients to all the time for sex and love addiction, substance abuse issues, etc. Do you recommend anything for that, the online support community groups?
Yes. Well, first of all, there's a lot of resources out there. I didn't come listed with some specific ones today, so forgive me. But there are all different kinds of groups being offered online. A lot of the eating disorder inpatient facilities and IOPs are offering groups right now. So if you Google that, you'll certainly find that there are free support groups being offered. I just always say, be very careful which groups you go to. I would never want you to go to a support group for eating disorders without having a primary therapist working with you as well. Because nothing can replace the information and the just the checks and balances that protect you from yourself, having individual treatment. I'm offering online sessions, phone sessions, and I am not alone. I'm one of several professionals. And I actually encourage clients, if they are going to start treatment right now with an individual therapist, to try to pick a therapist in their area, in their neighborhood, because God willing, this all goes very quickly. I mean, it would be nice for you to be able to go and see them at some point in their office if you can.
Right.
So I'm encouraging therapists to use discretion in who they treat, and for clients to really think about, do I want to connect in person down the line as they're selecting their therapist right now? If that's not important, fine. But if it's something with eating disorders, I prefer people see a therapist in person, because there's so many nuances that are missed on the body that an eating disorder specialist can't see necessarily on a screen, but can see in person.
Okay.
Years ago, I had a client come in where her hands, if you looked at her hands, she went like this. She swiped her hair away from her face. And what I saw was that the blood was kind of pooling in her fingertips, and her palm looked white. And she happened to go to the same pediatrician that I took my kids to at the time. And I immediately called the pediatrician. I said, I don't like how her hands look. Ironically, she had come from the pediatrician's office to my office. And the pediatrician said, send her back. We're closing in 15 minutes. Just send her right now. Her blood pressure and everything was perfect when she was here, but send her back. And she left my office immediately, went back over to the pediatrician's office, and went straight into the hospital that day. She was on the verge of her heart went into an arrhythmia from the time that she was at the doctor's office to the time that she had left. So had it not been for my ability to see the color of her hands, she probably would have had some kind of a heart problem that night. Her blood pressure dropped way down. She wasn't circulating properly. So that saved her life. And she was on the cardiac unit long before she went into an eating disorder unit. So these are the kinds of things that we need to really, really be aware of as specialists when it comes to working with eating disorder clients. So I tell clients, be very choosy,
Right.
so that eventually you can see your therapist in person when it comes to this particular disorder. Not all of this is as necessary, but with this one it is.
Right. And something I wanted to add too is I think when we always think that drug addiction and substance abuse addiction is very deadly, right? Because the chemicals
Mhm.
involved. But eating disorders are very deadly. They're very dangerous, right?
Absolutely. It's interesting because I taught a continuing education course not too long ago on eating disorders. And I was doing my research about statistics and whatnot. One of the things that I found was that more individuals have been known to die from the complications related to eating disorders than even drug addiction, which is shocking. But then you add in this whole game of whack-a-mole that so many individuals play, and a person might move from drug addiction to eating disorder behavior and bounce back and forth between the two on top of that. That's, we see that a lot with
Right.
binge drinking and then moving into bulimic activity. I see that all the time in my practice.
Or as the anxiety goes up, the eating disorder becomes more prevalent, the depression occurs, that
Yep,
they self-medicate all over the place between substance abuse, shopping, eating the chocolate cake. I mean, everything is used as a
absolutely.
external coping mechanism to regulate within themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. All these things happen kind of simultaneously. And then you and I know working together at a rehab, like, you get rid of one behavior, like when our clients come into the rehab, obviously we're not passing out the booze. So what starts to happen, we start to, all of a sudden I get pulled into a case because someone's binging.
Right.
It's very, very common when you don't have your drug of choice to turn to a different coping mechanism, and food could be one of them, or lack of food could be one of them.
Okay. So how all of this information has been fabulous and I appreciate your time. But if we have more questions beyond this video, just simple questions about what people might be seeing, resources, etc., how do people get a hold of you, Michelle?
Okay, so there's lots of different ways that you can get a hold of me. The easiest way is probably my website. I'm Michelle Gross, MFT, LMFT.com. So you can find me through that. My phone number is listed on there, and all kinds of, I also have some information. I have some articles on my website about treatment facilities that I work with for eating disorders. Favorite books on all disorders. I have a great resource page that talks about all different disorders and what kinds of resources are out there, facilities that you can go to and whatnot. I've got some videos on eating disorders that I've put out, as well as articles that I've written that are very helpful. To name a few, one of them is all about bigorexia, which is the up and coming trend. I have a thing about orthorexia, which is a preoccupation with health. I have an article called Running on Empty, which is about exercising when one is eating eating way too little. So there's some great resources there on my website that I think would be very, very helpful for you. And then of course, I'll be posting today the information on the 8 traits of emotional hunger, which I think you'll find really, really beneficial. This is something that my clients are just absolutely loving, that I found recently, that there's all different ones out there, but this one I found really helps a person recognize, when am I emotionally hungry versus when am I physically hungry? And it's just so clear and concise. So that's a great resource as well.
And I wanted to close with, I do a lot of my webinars and videos on healthy relationships versus toxic relationships. How does this disordered eating, just similar to substance abuse, we think it just affects us, it impacts us, it's our problem, we're doing it to our bodies, leave me alone. But how does this obsessive thinking around food rules, strict, behaviors around food, how does this impact relationships?
Oh my goodness, we haven't even touched on the dynamics that go on in the family. And so what's so interesting is the family members are, for good reason, very, very concerned when they're watching their loved one overeat or undereat or overexercise. They're terrified. And they should be, because like we've talked about, eating disorders are deadly. Ironically, with eating disorders in particular, it's kind of the law of opposites. What our gut tells us to do to be supportive and helpful tends to backfire. There's a big need for control when it comes to eating disorders. So if we see like a young lady starving herself during dinner time, and mom starts saying, "You've got to eat your dinner, you've got to finish, what are you trying to do? Kill yourself." What happens is the eating disorder gets louder. It's almost like this friend inside of the client's head telling them, "Oh no, don't eat. Don't eat. She's going to make you overweight. She doesn't know what's good for you. Look at her body. Do you see how it's worked for her?" And so it feels like a friend, but it's really an enemy, the voice within, I call it. And then, you know, an argument ensues at the dinner table. So what I tell family members, and I have a whole article that I'm happy to provide as well on how to help your eating disordered loved one, which is great. It's just a resource that I give to my clients, usually in Family Therapy 101 about eating disorders. But that talks about, it's much more important to get to the underlying issue of what's going on for the person at the table, which has nothing to do with food, by the way, or their body. Usually something else is stressing them out at the time. So instead of saying, "Hey, eat your dinner," if we see that they're not eating the dinner, to say to them, "Hey, you know, are you stressed? How was your day?" And you don't even have to say, "I notice you're not eating," but to give them an opportunity to vent and not attempt to fix it, to just do reflective listening. "Oh, so this happened. Oh, that must have been awful. I'm so sorry you're going through that. You know, if there's anything I can do, you want to hang, watch a movie later," to distract them. Sometimes that's enough where they'll start eating. But when we get into a battle of the wills, the eating disorder gets louder. And one other thing I'll say about that for family members is it's really critical to not talk about one's own weight, what's going to happen during COVID to one's own body. That is really, really triggering for the eating disorder client. I've heard all kinds of comments during this week of parents saying, "Well, I'm blowing up like a balloon," to, "Wow, you know, there's no food and I think I'm losing weight. And I've never exercised so much in my living room in my life." And my clients are really, really reactive to this. They internalize everything and make it about themselves. Even when another person maybe needs to lose a little bit of weight for their own health, my anorexic client will be like, "Why are they allowed to lose weight and I'm not?" And it's kind of like game on.
That is all really great information. So I'd encourage anyone, if you have leftover questions that I wasn't able to cover, to please email Michelle. Her links and her information will be down below in the comments section. She has her own YouTube channel as well for more information. She sounds like she has a great website with a lot of additional information. And I personally am really grateful for you coming and talking about this really important subject that I think is only going to become more prevalent and obvious over the next several weeks to months as we all collectively deal with these extremely stressful, intense, long-term struggles. So I appreciate it so much. And any last comments or things that you want to add?
No, just thank you so much for having me here today. I really, really appreciate it. And my hope is that you and your loved ones will all stay healthy out there, and use this as an opportunity to focus on balance in your lives and health across the board in everything that we do. So that would be pretty much it for today. I so appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going